Hi guys, we're going to carry on with our story. I'm so excited to hear if Charlie's birthday chocolate has one of those golden tickets. Don't tell anyone if you've read it before. We are going to read 2 chapters again. For some reason, these chapters seem to be really small. So if you're reading at home, we need to be on chapter 7 and then we're going to read chapter 8 afterwards. And chapter 7 is called Charlie's Birthday. Happy birthday, cried the 4 old grandparents as Charlie came into the room early the next morning. Charlie smiled nervously and sat down on the edge of the bed. He was holding his present, his only present, very carefully in his 2 hands. Wonka's Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mallow Delight, it said on the wrapper. The 4 old people, 2 at either end of the bed, propped themselves up on their pillows and stared with anxious eyes at the bar of chocolate in Charlie's hands. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket came in and stood at the foot of the bed watching Charlie, and the room became silent. Everyone was waiting now for Charlie to start opening his present. Charlie looked down at the bar of chocolate and he ran his fingers slowly back and forth along the edge of it, stroking it lovingly. The shiny wrapper made little sharp crackly noises in the quiet room. Then Mrs. Bucket said gently, "You mustn't be too disappointed, my darling, if you don't find what you're looking for underneath the wrapper. You really can't expect to be as lucky as all of that." "She's quite right," said Mr. Bucket. Charlie didn't say anything. "After all," said Grandma Josephine, "in the whole wide world there's only 3 tickets left to be found." "The thing to remember," Grandma Georgina said, "is that whatever happens, you'll still have a bar of chocolate." "Wonka's Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mallow Delight," cried Grandpa George. "It's the best of them all and you'll love it." "Yes," Charlie whispered, "I know." "Just forget about those golden tickets and enjoy the chocolate, Charlie," Grandpa Joe said. "Why don't you do that, eh?" They all know it's ridiculous to expect this one poor little bar of chocolate to have a magic ticket inside, and they were trying as gently and as kindly as they could to prepare poor Charlie for any disappointment. But there was one other thing that grown-ups also knew, and it was this. However small the chance might be of striking lucky, the chance was still there. The chance had to be there. That particular bar of chocolate had as much chance as any other as having a golden ticket. And that was why all the grandparents and parents in the room were actually just as tense and excited as Charlie, although they was pretending to be very calm. "You better go ahead and open it up or you'll be late for school," said Grandpa Joe. "You might as well get it over with," Grandpa George said. "Open it, my dear," Grandma Georgina said. "Please open it, you're making me jumpy." Very slowly, Charlie's fingers began to tear open one small corner of the wrapping paper, and the old people on the beds leaned forward, craning their scraggy necks. I'll show you that's Charlie sitting with his bar of chocolate, and you can see his grandparents all peering in to have a look. Suddenly, as though he couldn't bear the suspense any longer, Charlie tore the wrapping paper right down the middle, and onto his lap there fell a light brown, creamy coloured bar of chocolate. There was no sign of a golden ticket anywhere. "Well, that's that," said Grandpa Joe brightly. "Just what we expected." Charlie looked up, and the 4 kind old faces were watching him intently from the bed. He smiled at them. It was a small, sad smile, and then he shrugged his shoulders and picked up the chocolate bar, held it out to his mother and said, "Here, Mother, have a bit, we'll share it. I want everyone to taste it." "Certainly not," his mother said, and all the others cried, "No, we wouldn't dream of it. It's all yours." "Please," begged Charlie, turning round and offering it to Grandpa Joe. But neither he nor anyone else would even take a tiny bite. "It's time to go to school, my darling," Mrs. Bucket said, putting an arm around Charlie's skinny shoulders. "Come on, or you'll be late." Poor Charlie. Chapter 8, 2 more golden tickets found. That evening, Mr. Bucket's newspaper announced the finding of not the 3rd golden ticket, but the 4th as well. "2 golden tickets found today," screamed the headlines. "Only 1 more left." "All right," said Grandpa Joe when the whole family was gathered in the old people's room after supper. "Let's hear who found them then." The third ticket, read Mr. Bucket, holding the newspaper so close to his face because his eyes were bad and he couldn't afford glasses. The third ticket was found by Miss Violet Beauregard. There was great excitement in the Beauregard household when the reporter arrived to interview the lucky young lady. Cameras were clicking and flashbulbs were flashing, and people were pushing and jostling and trying to get a bit closer to the famous girl. And the famous girl was standing on a chair in the living room, waving the golden ticket madly at arm's length, as though she was flagging a taxi. She was talking very fast and very loudly at everyone, but it was not easy to hear because she was chewing so ferociously upon a piece of gum at the same time. "I'm a gum chewer normally," she shouted, "but when I heard about these ticket things of Mr. Wonka's, I gave up gum and started on chocolate bars in the hope of striking lucky. Now, of course, I'm back on the gum. I just adore gum. I can't do much about it. I munch all day long except for a few minutes at meal times, when I take it out and stick it behind my ear for safekeeping. To tell you the truth, I simply wouldn't feel comfortable if I didn't have that little wedge of gum to chew on every moment of the day. I simply wouldn't. My mother says it's not ladylike and it looks ugly to see a girl's drawers going up and down like mine do all the time, but I don't agree. And who is she to criticise me anyway? Because if you ask me, I'd say her jaws are going up and down almost as much as mine from the yelling at me every minute of the day." "Now, Violet," Mrs. Beauregard said from a far corner of the room where she was standing on the piano to avoid being trampled by the mob. "All right, mother, keep your hair on," Miss Beauregard shouted. "And now," she went on, turning to the reporters again, "it may interest you to know that this piece of gum that I'm chewing on at the moment, this one I've been working on for 3 months solid. That's a record, it is. I've beaten the record held by my best friend, Miss Cornelia Prince-Metal. She was furious. It's my most treasured possession now, this piece of gum is. And at night time I stick it on the end of the bedpost, and it's good as ever in the mornings. Bit hard at first, maybe, but it soon softens up after I've given it a few good chews. Before I'd start chewing for the world record, I used to change my piece of gum once a day. I used to do it in our lift on the way to school. Why the lift? Because I liked sticking the gooey piece that I'd finished on one of the control buttons. Then the next person who'd come along and press the button got my own gum on the end of his or her finger. Ha ha! And what a racket they kicked up, some of them. You get the best results with women who have expensive gloves on. Oh yes, I'm thrilled to go to Mr. Wonka's factory. And I understand that afterwards he's going to give me enough gum for me to last the rest of my life. Whoopee, hooray! Ugh, beastly girl, Grandma Josephine said. Despicable, said Grandma Georgina. She'll come to a sticky end chewing all that gum. You see if she doesn't. And who got the 4th golden ticket? Charlie asked. Now let me see, said Mr. Bucket, peering at the newspaper again. Ah, yes, here we are. The 4th golden ticket, he said, was found by a boy called Mike TV. Another bad lot, I'll be bound, muttered Grandma Josephine. Don't interrupt, Grandma, said Mrs. Bucket. The TV household, said Mr. Bucket, going on with his reading, was crammed like all the others with excited visitors when our reporter arrived. But young Mike TV, the lucky winner, seemed extremely annoyed by the whole business. "Can't you fools see I'm watching television?" he said angrily. "I wish you wouldn't interrupt me." The 9-year-old boy was seated before the enormous television set, his eyes glued to the screen. He was watching a film with one bunch of gangsters shooting up another bunch of gangsters with machine guns. Mike TV himself had no less than 18 toy pistols in various sizes hanging from belts around his body. Every now and again he would leap into the air and fire off a dozen rounds from one or another of his weapons. "Quiet," he shouted when someone tried to speak and ask him a question. "Didn't I tell you not to interrupt? This show's an absolute whiz-banger. It's terrific. I watch it every day. I watch all of them every day, even the rotten ones where there's no shooting. I like the gangsters best. They're terrific, those gangsters. Especially when they start pumping each other full of lead, or flashing the old stilettos, or giving each other 1, 2, 3 with their knuckle dusters. Gosh, what I wouldn't give to be doing that myself. It's the life, I tell you, it's terrific. That's quite enough of that, snapped Grandma Josephine. I can't bear to listen to it. Nor me, said Grandma Georgina. Do all children behave like that nowadays? Like these brats we've been hearing about? Of course not, said Mr. Bucket, smiling at the old lady in bed. Some do, of course. In fact, quite a lot of them do, but not all. And now there's only 1 ticket left, said Grandpa George. Quite so, said Grandma Georgina. And just as sure as I'll be having cabbage soup for supper tomorrow, that ticket will go to some nasty little beast who doesn't deserve it. Here you go, you can see Mike TV with the humongous TV and all those horrible guns he's got round his waist. There's only 1 ticket left. And tomorrow we're going to read chapter 9. Grandpa Joe takes a gamble and wonder who is going to get that last ticket.